It is finally time. The 2026 NBA regular season is over and it's now playoff time. It's actually here. I feel like this regular season has flown by. I just kind of wanted to make a video right after the NBA regular season ends. I want to talk about what the postseason could potentially look like. Maybe some early thoughts about these series, how the play-in tournament can go as well. Later this week, I will be doing my full playoff prediction after we know who wins the play-in tournament games on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. So we can start off in the Eastern Conference. This playoff seedings were pretty much set before the Western Conference side of things. We had a bunch of things go down today on Sunday. I like when everybody is playing. It does feel like later, though, Adam Silver pushed some of these games back. I don't know if it was the Masters. I know the Masters and the end of the regular season fell on the same day last year as well. But we basically had three games that were going to decide what the Eastern Conference was going to look like here in round number one. You had the Boston Celtics and the Orlando Magic. You had the Atlanta Hawks and the Miami Heat. And then you had the Brooklyn Nets and the Toronto Raptors. And the Raptors were going up against the Brooklyn Nets, who wanted to stay as the worst team in the NBA, basically. And they were throwing out their G League roster. They ended up finishing the season with the third worst record. Raptors ended up blowing them out by 35 points. The Atlanta Hawks were actually fine with whoever they drew in round number one, if it was going to be the New York Knicks or the Cleveland Cavaliers. So they basically benched a ton of their top guys against the Miami Heat. They ended up losing by 26. And then it came down between the Boston Celtics and the Orlando Magic. And if the Orlando Magic won, we were going to see basically a three-way tie for the 5 seed, but how the tiebreakers would have shaped out. If Orlando beat the G League Boston Celtics, we would have saw Orlando as the 7th seed, Toronto as the 6th seed, and Atlanta would have stayed at the 5 seed. But then it became just a two-way tiebreaker because the Orlando Magic actually lost to the Boston Celtics. This was pretty much the main Celtics out there. Yeah, Baylor Shireman goes for 30. Ron Harper Jr., the brother of Dylan Harper, goes for 27. Luka Garza goes for 27. He also knocked down the game-winning three-pointer as well. And what just makes it worse for Orlando, they basically played everybody. They were at full strength. Jed Howard was hurt. Jonathan Isaac was hurt. But no, like Franz, Paolo, Bane, and Suggs all played. Bane was kind of on somewhat of a minutes restriction, but he closed out the game for them as well. Paolo Banchero shot 7 of 22 against the Boston Celtics, a team that didn't have Jaylen Brown. They didn't have Jason Tatum. They didn't have Derek White. They didn't play any of their top guys. And Orlando lost this game. It's actually unbelievable. It's kind of fitting with how this Orlando Magic season went. So they are now in the play-in tournament. They're going to be the 8th seed. They're going up against the 76ers. They have to play in Philadelphia in the 7-8 matchup. Charlotte, who did win today against the New York Knicks, who pretty much benched all their starters as well. They finished as the 9th seed, and then you have the Miami Heat as the 10th seed. So we can start off with maybe what's going to be the most entertaining round one series in the Eastern Conference. You have the New York Knicks versus the Atlanta Hawks. It's not going to feel the same now that Trae Young is no longer on Atlanta, but obviously these two teams had a very entertaining playoff matchup 5 years ago. I can't believe it's been 5 years since that 2021 matchup where Trae Young basically became the villain of the New York Knicks. And Atlanta ended up going to the Eastern Conference Finals that year. I mean, the Knicks team also looks so different, right? There's no more RJ Barrett, no more Julius Randle. Derrick Rose was one of the top scoring options on that team. The only Knick that is still here today from that team, Mitchell Robinson. And the Atlanta Hawks have been one of the best teams in the NBA since the All-Star break. Nickeil Alexander-Walker has been absolutely killing it for the Atlanta Hawks, and he's most likely going to win Most Improved Player. Jalen Johnson is most likely going to end up on an All-NBA team. CJ McCollum has really helped the Atlanta Hawks offense turn it around in the second half as well. You throw in guys like Jonathan Kuminga, Dyson Daniels, and Onyeka Okongwu. This is not an easy team to go up against. Now, the New York Knicks were definitely inconsistent throughout the regular season, but they always had their eyes set on the playoffs after losing in the conference finals last year to the Indiana Pacers. They were just hoping to be healthy going to the playoffs. They still won over 50 games this year. They are the same seed that they were last year as well, where they were the 3 seed in 2025. Same thing this year. I'm sure that they would have rather played the Toronto Raptors, just given how one-sided that season series matchup was. It just felt like the Knicks always have the Raptors number. They matched up extremely well against them. That's not the case. I do think Atlanta, like Detroit last year, is another tough draw for the New York Knicks just because of how well they've been since the trade deadline. Like, this team has a top 3 record in the NBA since the trade deadline. They have a top net rating. They have the best net rating in the Eastern Conference since the trade deadline. And Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Jalen Johnson are maybe the best offensive wing duo in the Eastern Conference right now if you're still not totally sold on Jason Tatum. Now, the Knicks do have 2 good wing defenders in OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges, who are built to go up against Boston. It can definitely be something similar against the Atlanta Hawks. I don't really think I'm going to go with Atlanta to win this series, but if the Knicks were going up against the Raptors, I thought that was going to be like a sweep, maybe a gentleman's sweep. But no, going up against Atlanta, this could definitely be a 6 or 7 game series. I'm going to go way more in depth when I'm talking about these series and how I think these teams can match up against each other when I make my playoff prediction video later this week. But the Knicks recently played the Atlanta Hawks on the road in Atlanta. They won 108-105, where Jalen Brunson kind of struggled at the start of the game, but he ended up with 30 points. Naw ended up with 36. The Brunson Cat pick and roll was really coming to life late in that game as well. And it felt like in that game something clicked because Cat and Brunson, that duo, looked great against Boston and looked great against Toronto. And I feel like they have a lot of momentum as a squad going into the playoffs, at least in terms of playing Eastern Conference teams, because before that, they lost to OKC. They lost to Houston in convincing fashion. But I do think this has a chance for once again being the best round one series in the Eastern Conference. Last year, I believe it was New York, Detroit. 2 years ago, it was New York, Philadelphia. It just feels like the Knicks will never like blow you out. It's always going to be a close and entertaining series. And I think that's just going to be the same thing again this year. So then the other locked in playoff series that we have in the Eastern Conference, the 4-seeded Cleveland Cavaliers going up against the 5-seeded Toronto Raptors. I didn't think this was going to happen because I thought Orlando was going to take care of business and beat the Boston Celtics. No, that doesn't happen. Where Toronto ends up making it in the playoffs, where they didn't really have a super high expectation going into the year. They were projected to win 39 games. They end up going 46-36. They're going to be relatively healthy going into the playoffs, pretty much at full strength, something we didn't get to see a ton of this year because of the Jakob Poeltl lingering back issues. RJ Barrett missed some time. I wouldn't say Scotty Barnes has been playing with a ton of momentum going into the playoffs, but I do think Brandon Ingram can thrive as a number one option. Now that DeAndre Hunter is no longer on the Cavs, I wonder who's going to get the Brandon Ingram assignment. Probably going to be a lot of Jalen Tyson, going to be some Dean Wade, which I'm definitely going to favor Brandon Ingram on that side of things. I'm also just worried about how the Raptors front court is going to go up against Cleveland of Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen, because you've kind of had to play Conway Boyles at the center spot this year. Jakob Poeltl has been super unreliable because of the injuries. Are you going to have to play Scotty Barnes at the 5? I haven't really loved the Scotty Barnes offensive numbers and offensive film as of late, with him kind of being more so a passive number one option. But this team is going to be a physical defensive squad, and hey, if they're knocking down their threes, it's not going to be an easy win for Cleveland. The Cavs did end up going all in this year, trading away Darius Garland for James Harden. They traded away DeAndre Hunter for Keon Ellis and Dennis Schroeder, so they were very active at the deadline after having somewhat of a disappointing start to the year because you win 64 games last year. A lot of people had the expectations that they were going to be the 1 seed again this year. They end up finishing 3 seeds worse than that. But I do feel like this has NBA TV written all over it. That is going to be probably the network that takes this series. I would be very shocked if Toronto ended up winning a playoff series, because that thought never crossed my mind at really any point this year. And that would just be such a huge disappointment for Cleveland, who went all in, trading away, like I said, Garland for Harden. Donovan Mitchell has yet to make it to a conference finals. You lost in an early exit last year to your standards against the Indiana Pacers in round number 2. So I would be like insanely shocked if Toronto won this series, but I do think it can have a little bit of like Orlando, Boston from last year, where Toronto's going to play them extremely tough, extremely physical. But when you get late in the game, I'm going to trust Donovan Mitchell and James Harden as shot creators over Brandon Ingram and Scotty Barnes right now. And then you have the play-in tournament teams. You have the Philadelphia 76ers, who are unfortunately going to be without Joel Embiid for the play-in tournament and most likely round number 1. He recently got diagnosed with appendicitis, so who knows really when Embiid is going to return. I know when you look at some previous examples of what this injury can look like, probably not going to play in round number 1. So if Philadelphia wins, they're going to be going up against the Boston Celtics. I'm sure Boston is rooting for Philadelphia to win this series because they played Orlando in round number 1 last year. I still think they would beat the Orlando Magic in round number 1, but they're at full strength. They could still play a physical style of basketball and somewhat wear down Boston when you still have maybe a fragile Jason Tatum, somebody you are a little bit nervous about going into a playoff series. From about a year later of his Achilles tear against the New York Knicks, I would expect Orlando to win this game. Philadelphia did win today on the final day of the NBA regular season against the Milwaukee Bucks, who I'm not going to talk about in this video because they're not in the playoffs, but they fired Doc Rivers, or at least they are parting ways. So Doc Rivers no longer coaching the Milwaukee Bucks. He was there for 2.5 years. They didn't win a single playoff series for that. He had multiple years left on his contract. I mean, it's just not been a good season for the Milwaukee Bucks, and who knows what's going on with their future with Giannis Antetokounmpo. But I would expect Orlando to beat Philadelphia in maybe an early play-in tournament prediction just because of the health of their roster. I know they just lost to the main Celtics, right? Like, they just lost to Luka Garza, Baylor Shireman, and Ron Harper. So Tyrese Maxey and Paul George can 100% beat this Orlando team. They're also going to be at home in Philadelphia. But it would shock me if Orlando somehow lost this game. If you look at the spread, it's actually favored for Philadelphia at -1.5. And that's just like so upsetting for Orlando and what this year could have been, because I remember in the offseason, I thought they were going to be a great regular season team, and that was just not the case. If they don't make it to the playoffs and they lose back-to-back playing games, I'm expecting Jamal Mosley to get fired immediately. And then your other playing tournament matchup, you have the 9-seeded Charlotte Hornets against the 10-seeded Miami Heat. Charlotte Detroit would obviously be a super entertaining outcome here in round number one. They did just play on Friday night, but I do think it could be an entertaining series where Detroit would probably win. They're going to be healthy now. Cade Cunningham came back with a few games to go in the regular season. They have some really good momentum heading into the playoffs as well. They just won 60 games this year. And Miami was a team that I just feel like never had consistent showings to me that they were going to be a formidable Eastern Conference playoff team. I do feel like they overachieved and underachieved at the same time this year. Thank God Bam Adebayo got 83 points, because I just feel like we wasted everybody's time. I don't know what Pat Riley expected to get out of this roster. And yeah, it would suck if Charlotte ended up losing this winner go home playing tournament game against Miami with how good they were all year long. But it could definitely happen. It wouldn't shock me in the slightest if Miami beat Charlotte in basically what's going to feel like a game 7 in Charlotte on Tuesday. Charlotte is projected to win that game by 5.5 points, so it would be a little bit of an upset if Miami won that game. I'm going to be rooting for the Charlotte offense. I think they can make it at least somewhat more competitive against Detroit in round number one, because I feel like if the Heat somehow made it to the playoffs as an 8 seed, we would just see what we saw last year with them against the Cleveland Cavaliers in round number one. And I'm sure Boston, like I said, would love to draw Philadelphia. I'm sure Detroit would love to draw Philadelphia. I think they're fine with whoever they ended up going up against. Maybe Atlanta would have been a little bit more of a scary playing tournament team, or the 76ers with Joel Embiid. I still want to say that like Orlando could be somewhat intimidating now that they are at full strength. But if you're just going to lose to the main Celtics, I don't think I could take you seriously. And then Charlotte, I think, could be scary just with their three-point shooting ability. And then if somehow this ends up going forward, you're going to see Detroit go up against the Cavs in round number 2, which I think is going to be such an entertaining series, because I think the Cavs can 100% beat the Pistons. And in my mind, I might even actually have the Cavs beating the Pistons in my playoff predictions, because the James Harden edition, it feels like it's a conference finals or bust season for Cleveland right now, but we'll break that all down later this week. And then you get the rematch, the storylines between Boston and New York in round number 2, where Jason Tatum tears his Achilles against the Knicks last year. The Knicks go to the conference finals for the first time in like 25 years, beating Boston in 6. Boston blows those first 2 games. Now they look like such a different team, right? Porzingis is out, Drew Holiday is out, Al Horford is out, Luke Cornett is out, and they brought in a bunch of new faces. I think that could end up also like stealing the show in the Eastern Conference side of things, because I do think they're a lot more even on their ability level than they were last year. I thought Boston was clearly the better team, and I don't think they blow those first 2 games. If you play those matchups like 100 other times, I think they win like 90 of them, which could also set up like Boston, Cleveland in the conference finals. You could set up New York, Cleveland. You could set up New York, Detroit in a rematch from last year's round number 1 series as well. I still believe that Boston has like the most momentum and is probably the most intimidating team on the Eastern Conference side right now. Just the way Jason Tatum has looked, they could beat the Orlando Magic with their D roster. I would not be shocked if Joe Mazzulla ended up winning Coach of the Year. Jaylen Brown is most likely going to end up on an All-NBA first team. So I still think they're the team to beat in the Eastern Conference. Let's talk about the West now. And if you thought the Eastern Conference side was going to be electric, the Western Conference is going to hand us what could be a conference finals matchup in some other years in round number 1 between the Denver Nuggets and the Minnesota Timberwolves. On Sunday, if the Denver Nuggets lost to San Antonio, they would have gone up against the Houston Rockets in round number 1. But no, they beat the Spurs as 10.5-point underdogs. So now they get the 6-seeded Minnesota Timberwolves in round number 1. They'd most likely get the 2-seeded San Antonio Spurs in round number 2, the Oklahoma City Thunder in round number 3. If the Nuggets ended up going to the NBA Finals this year, this might be one of the toughest paths I've ever seen. And then obviously we should just start about this series too. It is what is going to be like a playoff rubber match, because back when Denver won it all in 2023, they beat the up-and-coming Timberwolves in round number 1. And then I thought Denver was going to go back-to-back, or at least win round number 2 against Minnesota in the 2024 playoffs. They get upset. They lose a game 7. Minnesota ends up losing to Dallas in the conference finals. Minnesota goes to the conference finals last year. Denver lost to OKC in round number 2. And we get these guys against each other in round number 1. And they arguably have the best regular season game this year as well. If you remember, on Christmas Day, they did an absolutely electric game. It was the last game of the Christmas Day slate. The Nuggets ended up winning 142-138. And one of these teams is going to have such a disappointing round 1 exit. For Minnesota, you're held to a higher standard given that you went to back-to-back conference finals. You still have one of the more expensive rosters in the league. You ended up letting Nickeil Alexander walk to bring back Naz Reid and Julius Randle. If they lose in round number 1, I wonder if we would see a noticeable change in Minnesota. And if Denver loses in round number 1 with their expectations going into the year, the offseason they had, I know finishing as a 3 seed isn't maybe what they wanted, but still watching this team, they could win the NBA Finals. I think they might have the best chance of beating OKC. We're definitely beating San Antonio in round number 2. So if they lost in round number 1, like what changes there? Is it a coaching change? Is it a massive roster shakeup? Who knows? But we're actually getting what could have been like one of the best possible results for a round 2 matchup or even a conference finals in round number 1. And I can't wait. So then the other matchup you get is a little bit bittersweet because the Lakers aren't at full strength. They are the 4 seed going up against the 5 seeded Houston Rockets. They did beat the Utah Jazz on Sunday. And I thought maybe Denver was going to lose to San Antonio, which was going to give us a Lakers-Wolves rematch in round number 1 as a 3-6 matchup. But no, the Lakers are the 4 seed. So we get LeBron James versus Kevin Durant in the year 2026. Like I said, though, it's a little bit bittersweet because Luka Doncic might miss the whole series. Austin Reeves is definitely missing the whole series. And it's going to be tough to think that the Lakers could pull off the upset. I mean, LeBron James is playing some really good basketball right now at age 41. Maybe he has one more carry job in him. Either way, this is probably going to be the most watched playoff series given that it is KD versus LeBron. The Lakers are still the biggest market, and it could be LeBron's last like meaningful playoff series. Like, who really knows where his career is going to go? I hope we see Luka Doncic return by like game 3 or game 4, so at least we get somewhat of a competitive series that I think either team can win, but it's really hard to envision the Lakers winning this series without Luka and Reeves. And I'm sure Rockets, their fans, the players, the staffs are very happy getting the Lakers in round number 1, because if the Rockets did not win a playoff series this year, after being the 2 seed last year, trading for Kevin Durant, it was going to feel like a very disappointing season, and you wasted one of Kevin Durant's final elite years of his career. But as long as nothing crazy happens against the Lakers, they should win round number 1. The Thunder are thrilled about this as well, because the Thunder would then draw the Lakers or the Rockets in round number 2. I'm sure they feel very comfortable against either of those 2 teams. They don't have to go up against the Denver Nuggets in round number 2 now. And that also just kind of affects the Spurs, because if the Spurs beat the Nuggets on Sunday, I know they didn't have Victor Wembanyama in that game. De'Aaron Fox didn't play great towards the end of it. You wouldn't have had to play the Denver Nuggets in round number 2, and it would have ended up being the Los Angeles Lakers or the Minnesota Timberwolves. I don't know how you don't take that. They end up losing by 10, and they were 10-point favorites. So the Spurs and Thunder obviously are taking on the playing tournament teams. You have the Phoenix Suns, who have been pretty much locked into the 7th seed for quite some time. They're going up against the Portland Trail Blazers, who are the 8th seed. I could definitely see Portland, with them getting a little bit healthier right now, pulling off the upset here in the 7-8 matchup. As the Suns will be favorites in this game, I do think, though, there could be an upset to be had. And I'm sure Chicago Bulls fans are really rooting for the Portland Trail Blazers, because if Portland makes the playoffs, Chicago gets their 1st round pick this year. And then on Wednesday, you get Kawhi Leonard versus Steph Curry. Like, I know this isn't going to be a playoff series, and one of these stars is going home just like that. That's going to be a lot of fun, though. You get a healthy Steph Curry versus hopefully a healthy Kawhi Leonard, who's been as good as anybody for probably the last few months. I would be shocked if the Clippers lost this game, but it's a 1-game matchup. Who knows how many Warriors fans are going to be there? Who knows what Steph you're going to get that night? Because if Steph goes for 35 and they play really good basketball, pods drop 30, so maybe the vibes have changed. This could be a little bit more of a disappointing exit for the Clippers, which means the OKC Thunder would just get a lottery pick. And we talked about the 76ers not being healthy. The Clippers and 76ers both lose in the playing tournament. Yeah, the 1 seed in the Western Conference, the Thunder, just got 2 lottery picks. And if you get Shea versus Curry, Shea versus Kawhi in round number 1, that's going to be a lot of fun. Phoenix did play Wemby pretty well this year. And that could end up being a round 1 matchup as well. If the Rockets were to advance, if the Nuggets were to advance, you get Jokic versus Wemby in round number 2. We just saw how good that matchup was a couple weeks ago, and I'm going to get a 7-game series out of that. Hell yeah, that could also be series of the playoffs that we get in round number 2 there. You could get OKC versus Houston, in which Houston had that really entertaining like double overtime game at the start of the year, and you never know how that series can go as well. And then you could get OKC versus Denver or San Antonio in the conference finals. I am super stoked for the playoffs. I'm just so glad it's finally here. I'm sure a lot of fan bases out there that have been watching the Nets, Wizards, Jazz, Pacers, Kings, you name it, are just thrilled the season is over and they no longer have to root for their teams to lose again. I don't have to watch random role players get triple doubles or drop 38 points, and we can actually watch elite basketball 7-game playoff series. I am so happy the playoffs are here. I'm going to be dropping my playoff predictions later this week, so make sure you guys are subscribed. Let me know what you guys think of the playoff seedings and matchups down below. Catch y'all on the next one. Peace.